Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
You know, sometimes when we get into a conflict with our spouse, we can feel like we have lost control. And it's important that we stay in control of our impulses, our facial expressions, our tone of voice, and how we come across to our spouse.
And so having some rules, you know, which is what we teach couples, is there needs to be some rules. It gives your spouse something to expect.
Yeah.
If your spouse expects that it will be a safe environment and he or she knows how it's going to flow, when we talk through this issue, they're going to be more likely to talk through the issues with you.
What's out of bounds for your spouse where you know that if you say something, a certain word, certain expressions, that's over the top. That is not allowed. We don't want to cross boundaries with our spouse into territory that puts your relationship at jeopardy.
Right. So some of the information that we'll use comes from Drs. Les and Leslie Parrott's The Good Fight, How Conflict Can Bring You Closer. So there's some ideas that they had that we want to spring off of.
How conflict can bring you closer. Now that's a unique idea. Sometimes, you know, we think that if we have conflict in our marriage, that means we have problems. And that's not true, is it?
No, because really those areas where we clash is where we haven't found unity yet. And so it's an opportunity to become one.
It is an opportunity. And how we deal with the conflict that we normally face in marriage is going to either take us closer or push us farther apart.
Right, and so we want to be objective. If we're looking at it as this is a piece of me you are rejecting or accepting, or versus I'm being objective. So there's this issue on the table, and we are going to talk about this separate thing here, and I'm going to be open to figure out we instead of pushing me.
Yeah. You know, sometimes having an inanimate object like a pen, for example, and say, this is what we're talking about, instead of thinking it is my spouse, and we kind of separate the issue from each other, and we can look at it then more objectively.
So taking time to even talk through what rules might you abide by. We have videos about the method, about resolving marital issues, where we present some rules that are very effective for couples. But you might talk through, okay, what's it going to look like when we talk through issues? Let's have a plan in place.
You know, one thing that's presented here in this material by the Parrotts is that there's 4 critical elements for working through an issue, and that is cooperation, ownership, respect, and empathy.
When we're cooperating, we're taking turns. We're listening, we're sharing. We might have a tendency to not say certain things because we don't feel safe, we don't think it's important. So cooperation, we're kind of pushing ourselves out there. We make this topic to be important to me. You know, things don't have to initially be all by themselves important to me, but guess what? If they're important to my spouse, they should be important to me.
That's right. And so we want to make sure that we're connecting with an issue that our spouse brings up, even if you don't think it's an issue. If it's an issue to them, it should be an issue to you also. Yeah,
and then agreeing to disagree when necessary. It's basically looking at your spouse and saying, you know, you have a right to your own opinions. And that we don't think identically. Now, we can a lot of times still find union on it if we can talk about these things.
You know, realizing that your spouse is not going to be a clone of you. They're not going to share exactly same thoughts and feelings as you and opinions about things. Allow your spouse to be different and have different thoughts and feelings, and that just adds a lot of variety and spice to your relationship.
So be willing to cooperate, to work with your spouse.
You know, another thing that we want to look at is ownership and what ownership involves.
So ownership excuse me, has to do with making a good apology, taking responsibility for my part in what's going on.
You know, I have some responsibility, obviously, for the things that I say and things that I present.
You know, and so we should mean it when we apologize. Now, there's definitely times when we don't always feel it, we don't always agree, but you know what? I can tell myself, because this bothered my spouse, I didn't mean to do anything that would cause discomfort emotionally. And because of that, I can apologize.
You know, what is a good apology made up of? And that is taking responsibility, feeling regret and committing to not doing it again.
Right, and that's important. So, you know, when we share something, we can use what they call the XYZ formula. In situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z. You don't have to elaborate. You don't have to beat your spouse up emotionally to get the point across of what's going on. You can be brief. Let the Lord deal with your spouse. You're not Holy Spirit.
You know, sometimes we just need to have that informing our spouse kind of mentality, that I'm letting you know this is something that you have done, and this is the impact that I'm feeling as a result of what you've done.
And so ownership does not mean I would say, well, you'll just have to adjust then because that's who I am. And it's like, well, you know, if you were single, that would be okay to say that.
Right.
But when you decided to marry somebody, you decided to become one with another person. And that means we have to make some adjustments. It doesn't mean that they now are dictator, right, or parent, but it does mean we have to be very willing to take responsibility for improving ourselves.
You know, we need to make sure that we're showing respect to our spouse, and when you don't agree over something, you know, we don't want to come across in a demeaning way as if they're not intelligent because you don't think just like me.
You know, contempt can come up in conflict, and I think it's kind of sarcasm out of control, basically, and it can make the listener get embittered, and it's actually a predictor of divorce.
Yeah. You know, we need to be willing to take a time out if we start seeing some negative things show up when we're working through a conflict in our relationship, and say, you know, I think we need to stop and let's come back and talk about this later.
Yeah. I think of respect is I respect myself and I respect my spouse. I know what's going on inside myself, and I cannot expect my spouse to. So I therefore take responsibility to be self-aware. I know when I'm escalating and closing. And so it's up to me to politely and respectfully make my spouse aware of that.
Yeah. You know, you can think of it kind of like closing the blinds, that whenever you feel that something like that's taking place and on the inside you're kind of closing the curtains or closing the blinds, you know, it's good to let your spouse know, hey, I feel like I'm kind of shutting down now. Let's stop and come back and talk about this later.
And certainly if we feel like we're escalating, we should let our spouse know, hey, would you make this adjustment for me so we can keep talking? You know, it might be tone of voice, facial expression, choice of words. It's fair to give them a moment to make an adjustment. But if they don't, we have to respect ourselves and our spouse, because there's certain things I don't allow myself to say to Sean, or certain ways that I might act. I don't allow those because Holy Spirit does not allow those. And I do not choose to grieve Sean or Holy Spirit. And so out of respect, we would take that time out. And we have to respect it if the other person asks for a time out.
That's right. You know, we may want to push ahead and say, no, we're talking about it, I want to finish it. But if your spouse is ready to stop, you need to respect that.
So you don't put a stumbling block in front of the other person, trip your spouse up, make them say something that everybody would regret, that would be a sin to them. Why go there? If you need to stop, stop. It's all about respect. How can we speak respectfully on this topic?
Yeah. The next thing we want to look at is empathy, and that is talking about the feelings that are behind the words, what your spouse has presented, and being able to connect with them with what they're feeling and experiencing.
So this is all about head plus heart. So a lot of us, will lean toward one or the other, or a combination of the two. Head, connecting on a head level, we can analyze and evaluate and understand the words and the meaning of the words. Heart means I understand the feeling behind the words. And so it's one thing to understand what my spouse is saying. It's another thing to understand what it feels like to be my spouse.
You know, feeling what they felt is what's going to help you to place the importance and the value on the behavior. Say you did something that was hurtful to your spouse, and understanding the impact of that. This is what he or she was feeling when this happened.
And it's really important to not judge your spouse or accuse your spouse. You have no right to feel like that. What's wrong with you? You need to accept your spouse is who they are. They have their own thoughts and feelings. They're not you.
That's right.
And it's okay if that hurt their feelings. Wouldn't you want your spouse to understand you if something hurt your feelings? Rather than to say back to you, I don't care. You shouldn't feel that way. You just need to change.
Yeah, we all have different things that we've experienced in our past and growing up, and the impact those things that have happened to us have on us now, and understanding how our spouse is responding to those things now based on what happened in the past.
Yeah, and so empathy means I not only hear your message, but I connect with the feeling behind the message. So say you are sharing something and you have a lot of feeling about it, you feel wounded, you feel hurt. I am able to rejoice with those that rejoice and weep with those who weep. Even in the marriage, like Jesus touched with the feelings of our infirmities, we can be touched with what our spouse struggles with. And so I can therefore say back to you and understand, okay, so I understand this is the problem you're seeing. And this seems to be the feeling that you're going through as a result. Is that right?
Making a connecting statement, wow, that must have really hurt when you saw that or when you heard that. Wow, I am so sorry that that happened. You must have felt this way.
Right. And then find out from your spouse's own mouth, how did they feel in that moment? What does it feel like to be married to you? What does it feel like to be on the other side of this event or conversation that happened? And then connect words and heart and head with the person, you know, with the emotion and with the intensity of the emotion. Jesus didn't say, you know, rejoice with those who are weeping. Weep with those who rejoice. No, the feeling is in kind. You're getting in there because, you know what, if we're one and you're feeling something, I'm feeling something.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get in there and I'm going to walk this out with you.
And it's realizing we're in this together, and the marriage is beautiful because we're sharing life together. We're experiencing these things together.